Alright, so before I sew anything up on a new project, I try to run a few test stitches to make sure that my tensions are correct and my stitch lengths are alright. And what I've got here is, this is just a piece of that gray leather that the body's made out of, and the same weight of the veg tan, and I just kind of stack them up and I'll run a few stitches just to make sure I've got good tensions and stitch lengths, because we don't want to get halfway down and find out that our stitch lengths are bad, or that we don't have good, that our stitch is not seating the way we'd like it to. And it adds a little bit of time, but you know what, if you're doing a few of these, it's definitely worth the time to sit down and do it, because you want to make sure that if you're doing several of these at a time, that everything is consistent. It looks like our stitch lines are pretty good. Our stitch length looks like the stitch is seated really well in there. So we're ready to sew. Let's see if I can get my lighting a little better in here. Alright, so this is just pretty straightforward. We'll go through, get everything stitched up. I'll do a couple back stitches at the beginning, so we might know that our stitch is going to be locked in really well and not come unraveled. But it's not going to be too big of an issue, because when we get this all folded up and the inside seam's done, some of these stitches are going to overlap on that inside seam, so it'll create kind of a double lock, I guess, if you will. And you know, it goes without saying, you know, if you're hand stitching this, you'd want to go ahead and get this hand stitched and done. Hand stitching would look really nice on a piece like this. It'd be real easy too if you have a bunch of different colored threads to run through your machine, or if you're hand stitching, to do some different colored threads on here. You know, a black thread would probably look good on this, or if I had a gray thread, the gray thread would look nice. But we're just gonna go with the white. I think the white stitch will look nice paired with the silver aluminum zipper that we have on there. And we just want to make sure we stay in our stitch groove there, so our stitches are laying nice and flat. And sewing, like everything else that we do, we don't want to get in a hurry, because this is one of those things that if you get in a hurry, it's real easy to run offline and completely ruin a piece that you're working on, because once those holes are punched, it's real hard to cover them up. Go out to the end here. We'll do a couple back stitches. Make sure that stitch is locked in real good. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and get these sewn up, and we'll get back to getting our zipper pulls added on later. So for the sake of saving a little time, we went ahead and did a time lapse here as I got the rest of the trim and the zippers sewn in place. Just straight line stitching, making sure that we back stitch at the end of every stitch line, and when we begin the stitch lines, then as soon as this is done, I'll take it over to the workbench, we'll trim our thread, and then we can burn those threads to get those locked in place, and then we can start working on getting the zipper pulls put on and continue the assembly of our Dopp kit. Again, just for the sake of saving some time, we time lapse this one. We're just burning the thread off here, trimming the threads, getting it ready to get our zipper pull added on. Not necessarily a step that has to be done. If you're back stitching, you shouldn't really have to worry about it, but I like to do it just for peace of mind. Okay, We've got it flipped right side out. We need to set our zippers. Now notice, our teeth are going in the same direction, and that's the direction we want our zipper pull to go. See how there's like the notch, almost like they're pointing that direction? That is the direction you want the front, the wide spot of your zipper going. Now if you ever forget which direction it's supposed to go, look down at your own zipper of your pants and unzip them and take a look, and that is a surefire way to make sure you're doing everything the right way. And don't feel bad if you do it. I have to do it quite often. Anyways, so we've got that on there. Now remember, our teeth were set a certain direction. Remember, we had the offset of the teeth. So we want to set it down and kind of line it up with our edges there to square everything up. And I see here, squared up, this right side tooth is the last one out. So we're going to try to get this fat in here. Kind of wrong direction. I'm going to come out a little way so I can get this. And you want to, the mouth of that zipper, you want to start running the cloth part through, because it's got to run through the slide as well. And it'll kind of help you. That's another good thing about having that little bit cut off. Remember, for our stitch lines, it also gives you a little extra to hang on to there, see? So, whoop, that didn't work out, did it? Let's try it again. This is probably the most difficult part for me. I have a really, it's just tedious work and can get frustrating sometimes because you got to make sure the teeth are lined up where you need them. It's one of those things, if you had one more hand. All right, so let's see if we can get her started here. All right, hey, I did it on the first pull there. So I've got it started. See how we've got that outside piece first? So we'll go ahead and pull it through. All right, so here's one of the things that I was talking about earlier when we said we'd get back to the zippers. So we've got our little stops, right? So the other style of stop is just a little crimp, a little U-shaped crimp that would go down here on these ends. It would crimp right there outside of this tooth, and you'll have a crimp on either side. And those are the stops, but I don't really like the way they look, and it kind of makes it kind of bulky right there. So what I like to do is I'll take these end stops that you'd usually just use on this end here, and then you'd use the crimps on either side here, but I like using it on both of them, but it's kind of tricky the way you got to do it. So your teeth need to be together to add these end crimps, so we're going to go ahead and pull this zipper all the way off. So we've got that together. We'll get this one set, and once this one's set, we can tear apart the zipper down here and start our pull all over again to get it started down there, and we can add our end crimp. So I've just got a little metal block here that I've got some veg tan to, and I've got a little piece of cutting board on there, and I'll lay that over here. And we've got our, our crimp there, and we want to go in a couple teeth because we want to crimp those teeth. And I'll just tap it with that hammer to kind of get it started, and you can push it through the rest of the way with your fingers, and you probably do it without having to tap it with the hammer, but it just makes it a little easier to get it started. All right, so you see there, we've got it started over the teeth, and they hang out over the sides there. Now we just need to tap those down to lay those teeth over. So we got that tapped in, and you can see there where the teeth are straddling the teeth of the crimp are straddling the teeth of the zipper. So we now have a full stop down there. And I probably could have gone one back so we didn't have that straggler of a tooth hanging out, but it'll be covered up pretty well when we get it all flipped and cleaned up. So we've got that. Now we're going to come through here and release this zipper, and we'll get our zipper started again. Now this is where it's also important to remember the alignment of those teeth. Which tooth was out the last one? Was it the top or the bottom? We can look down here and see that it was our bottom tooth that was the last one out. So that tells us the top tooth on this one needs to be the last one out, and that'll make sure everything's even when we get everything restarted here. Nope. Okay, so see there? I got it started, but I skipped a tooth there, if you can see. See how we skipped one? So we're gonna have to come back off of it so we can get that tooth realigned where we need it to be. So we'll try to pull that bottom down a little bit, see if we can't get things where they need to be. All right, so we did it again, but now we're off because it was that bottom tooth. So we gotta do it again because we want that top tooth to be the last one out. Again. Now I doubled up again. So you can see here where it can be kind of tedious and a pain in the butt. There we go. All right, so we got it on that one. So we've got, that's our, remember we offset them. So this top side is the last one out. And on this other side, we can see here, our bottom side's the last one out. So now we'll get our other crimp. I think I threw it back in here. Get that one crimped on there. Pushed through all the way, seated really well. Now we got that one on there. Now this side's kind of laying on top of the teeth, but these are kind of straddling the teeth, and I don't think that that'll cause any issues. It's still on there good and tight, so there shouldn't be any problems at all. So congratulations. We now know how to do zippers. So next, we're going to flip this thing inside out and get things lined up. We'll get our pull tabs put on there, and it'll be ready to be sewn up and just almost completed. All right, so we've got our zipper on. We've got our trim sewn on, our zipper's in place, ready to go. So what we need to do now, because the assembly requires that this thing is put together inside out, we're going to unzip that and roll it inside out. Maybe. This will always make you a little nervous the first time, hoping that everything's sewn up well and set well, that nothing busts loose. Alright, so we've got it flipped inside out. Now, this is one of the most important things, okay? If you do anything else off that you can redo, no problem. But when you get ready to sew your corners and everything together, you make sure that this is open and unzipped. Because if you sew all these corners up and that zipper's closed, There's no way to get that zipper open without busting seams. You can wiggle, finagle, and do whatever trying to push the back of that zipper pull to open it, and it won't do it. You will cause yourself such a headache trying to get that done, it will drive you crazy. So, what we need to do is, remember how I said we may have a little bit of excess zipper cloth hanging off? See how we've got some hanging off there? I'm just going to take some scissors and trim that flush with our edges there. Help us make sure everything stays in a straight line. Okay, so now we want to add our pulls. But first, we need to figure out which end we're going to put our handle on. I like my handle to be put on the closed zipper side, so it's open right now. I like my handle to be on the closed zipper side, so right here, so you can pull it. Hang on to your handle to pull it closed. Just my preference. You can do it either way. But since that's the way I like to do it, we need to figure out where our closed side is. So that's going to be this side. If that zipper was pulled down, it'd be that side. So I'm going to lay this flat like this because I need to do my bag punch to give us our slots to be able to put our handle in later on. So I can look at this one here and look where that seam's at and say, you know, I need to go in about an inch and a quarter or so from where the seam's gonna fold. That seam fold is gonna be right here. So we wanna add about a 1/4 inch to that. So I'm gonna go in 2 3/4 of an inch. We'll mark that gap right there is just a little over 4 inches. So we'll mark that as our center line. And I said 1 3/4 inches. About right there. And make sure you do it this step too, because it's real tricky trying to get in there and punch these holes when it's all assembled. And then you need to go ahead and punch a hole where your rivet will be going through. That one right there. And I use solid copper or solid brass number 9 rivets. There we go. So we've got that done. So the only tricky part is going to be getting those rivets set once it's all put together. So it's best to go ahead and do this step now, so you're not trying to get that, because it's real hard to get those even on both sides when it's all assembled. Alright, so now we want to set our pull. So we know we're not going to put a pull on the side of the handle, so we're going to put it on this side over here. So I'll close it a little bit, that way I can get everything to lay kind of flat here. And we'll take that pull that we've already got glued up, and now remember this is backwards, inside out. So you're going to put it in here just like this. And then when we sew, you know, our sew line is going to be about right here. It's going to run right outside those zipper teeth. Remember where we trim that cloth at? So our line's going to go about right there. So if you want to, you can pull that tab out just a little bit. That way you know it's going to be sewn real well, so you don't accidentally skip over it. And then like we did with the zipper cloth, we can go back through and we can trim that out. Now one other little step that I like to do on these is, from some of this scrap that we've got from when we cut the bags out, is I like to take a piece and put it right here. Just gives a little bit extra structure to go over the zipper tape right here. That's gonna kind of hold everything in place real well. And that way also, if there's any gap right here between the end of your teeth and the zipper tape and where you sew it, there won't be a hole you can see through. It'll just look like a little cover up right there, a little lap. So what I'll do is I'll cut that. Hey bud, come here. You wanna come say hi?
Yeah.
Can you wave to the camera? Say hi right here. Say hi.
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 He's not in it.
Let's take a break here. Can you say hi to the camera?
Hi, camera.
Hi, camera.
Look right here, Link.
This
Say
is
cheese.
say this is Lincoln Henry, and he's my shop helper. Are you my shop helper?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm the shop.
Are we making some shave bags?
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you have a good nap?
Yes.
Yes. All right. All right. Well, I'm gonna go play with this stinker for a little while, and then we'll get back to our tutorial later on. So we've got our trim piece, or not our trim, but we've got our pull tab that's all ready and done. As I was talking about earlier, I always cut out a couple little reinforcement pieces here. It kind of cleans it up, gives a little extra backing, especially across the zipper cloth or the zipper tape. And I'll put that across there. And then our tab, remember, we're inside out and backwards. It's going to go inside like so, and I'll typically hang it out just a little ways and then go back through, and I can trim that, but this way I know that I'm getting a good stitch line going through there, and it'll be good. So I've got that on both sides, and we are ready to sew these up. The baffling part that I had such a terrible time understanding till I saw it finally being done. Alright, so I was a dum-dum and forgot to swap over my camera to video and just took a single picture when I was sewing this up and talking through it. So I'll just kind of show you what I just sewed up. So our first sewing lines are going to be these areas right here. Not our corners, but you just want to go 2 straight lines there. And you don't have to go all the way to the end, because we're going to need a little bit of play right there when we pinch our corners. And then on this side, we've got our pull tab in there, and I ran into a little bit of trouble because that was such a big jump for the sewing machine, because it got so thick, went from flat to that kind of ridge. So I had to go real slow here to make sure we got our stitches to go all the way through without skipping any stitches or getting nasty in there. But we've got those sewn up, and I'm sorry I missed that. I've got several of these to do, so I may try to add that in later. But I'm going to go ahead and trim my thread ends and get those burned, and then we'll come back over here and I'll show you how we do those corners. Okay, so like we just discussed, we just sewn our straight lines here on the outsides of the shave bag. Now before we continue, it is very, very, very important that you pay attention to your zipper position. I know I mentioned this earlier, but it's very important that you do this. So I've got my zipper partly closed, and the reason I have that is because it helped keep this end kind of straight. And I may leave it partially closed to do the corners, but the best rule of thumb is, while you still have a chance, to go through and open that zipper, open as far as it's going to go, because we're going to pinch our corners and sew our corners, and if you're not paying attention and go through and sew up all your corners, this bag is inside out. And I don't know if there's a way to push that zipper from behind, especially if it's a locking zipper. It's very difficult to open it if it's closed all the way. I've done it once, and I ended up having to cut cut my corner out so I could just get in there to get the zipper started, to get my finger in there to work it open. Because these bags are made inside out, when those corners are done, we're gonna have to flip this whole thing inside out. So that zipper has to be open. So whatever you do, before you start on your corners, make sure your zipper is open, because you don't want to be cursing me or yourself if you forget to do it. So let's flip it over and I'll show you how we do these corners, and I'll kind of go through it right now actually. But so for the longest time I couldn't really fully comprehend how these corners were done, because I'd never seen it done, and I had read in several how-tos and online write-ups and blogs how to do it, but it never really quite made sense to me till I saw it done. So hopefully this will help a lot of you out there to kind of get an idea, and for it to kind of be an aha moment for you. So we've got our corners like this, right? We've sewn our flat, and what you're going to do is essentially pull those corners out. Pull it out like so, and pinch it flat. Okay, so if you'll see here, now it'll take a little bit of manipulation when I get it on the machine to kind of keep everything straight, but this was our straight flat edge. We'll pull those corners, and our stitch line is going to just go along this right here, and right here we'll have to jump this seam and kind of lay it over and sew over it. But you pull those corners like that, and that's what creates your corner when you flip that inside out with a clean seam. So that's the same with every single corner. Here's another shot here. You can just press down, grab it by the corners there, and pinch it and pull, and kind of lay it flat. That's a little better example there. That side lined up really well. You can kind of see there how it's all done up. And what I'll normally do when I sew this is I will just, that seam, that thick seam right there, I'll lay it one way or the other. And the way I decide which way to lay that kind of depends. Once I get sewn halfway, I'll pull it one way or the other, and it normally pulls one direction, which will either keep the side straight and lined up, or it'll kind of throw it out of whack. But there you have it. That is how you do those box corners. Same thing with the totes that I make. It's basically the same idea, but instead of having 4 corners of the tote, you've just got the 2 corners on the bottom of the bag. And there are plenty other bags and things with that applies as well. So I'm going to flip around and we'll get these corners sewn up, and we'll just about be finished. Okay, so we've got, everybody understands how the corners are done, and you know, you may have to kind of twist the bag up a little bit on the rest of the body to kind of get everything to kind of move in place where you need it to go. But once you kind of get it straight the way you want it, you just start sewing. And just like everything else, yeah, we'll leave that off. I'm going to start off about 3/4 of an inch or an inch in, because I'm going to do a couple back stitches on here. Definitely want to get some good back stitches on these corners, because that's going to be a pretty big stress point. And on these inside seams, kind of hard to tell here, but in these on these inside seams here, I don't mark a stitch line because I can eyeball that pretty well. If you need to get you a marker or a pencil or something and draw in how far you want your stitch line to go for it. If you need a guideline to go by, get after it and do it. It won't hurt anything. Maybe save you some time or save you some heartache. But I don't do it because I can pretty well keep my walking foot as my guide when I'm doing this. And if we can see in here, here's that seam that we sewed up earlier. And I'm just going to roll that seam forward like this and sew over that and keep going. So here we go. And be careful if you're using a sewing machine. I shouldn't have to tell you this, but be very careful holding that in there, getting your fingers all up in there. Just be careful. Don't sew through your finger. Down to the end, we're going to back stitch a few. And normally I would go ahead and do the rest of these corners on a time lapse just to save time in the video. But I'm going to go ahead and do it real time, just if anybody else is having a hard time understanding this. So here we go. We've got our first box corner there. If you can see, kind of get around the sewing machine here. So that's going to create our box corner. When we flip that inside out, it's going to look really nice. And I'll just go ahead, since I'm on that end, go ahead and get this other corner. And like I said earlier, you can manipulate this leather, kind of bend it or fold it however you need to, the whole bag, to kind of to get those edges to line up really well. So again, we're going to start in about 3/4 of an inch and backtrack a few, get those locked in really nice. Okay, so here is one thing that can go one way or the other. On these seams here, I try to fold them in the same direction. Now sometimes that doesn't work out real well, because if you fold it one way or the other, it may throw out the alignment of the rest of that corner. So just before you sew over it, just flip it both ways and see which way is going to keep things the squarest for you. And right now, the way I've got it, going the same direction as the other side is going to keep things good and straight and square on that side. So I'm going to go ahead and keep it laid over that same direction as the other side. Alright, then back stitch a few. And that side is done. Alright. Now, talking more about that seam, the way I've got it. See how I've got those folded up and sewn over on both sides? I'm going the same way. Now, in the event that you have to fold one in the opposite direction to keep things straight, it's not always bad, because there is a potential that it could distort it just a little bit on the outside when you flip it out, just kind of offset things. But the few that I've had to do that way, it doesn't cause a big enough offset that's really noticeable or anything that's really damning. Now, again, you've got your one side done. This is your last chance to check your zipper. Make sure your zipper's open. Alright, so once that one side's done, it kind of gets kind of tricky to get these pressed down flat the way you want them, because you don't have as much play throughout the whole bag. So I normally have to kind of fold it around a little bit, just kind of get it, fold over your knee or whatever you've got to do to get things kind of where they need to go. And once you do a few of these, you'll kind of figure out what direction you need to roll the leather, the body of the leather around, to kind of get things to line up. Alright, so I've got that pretty good and straight and square. So again, about 3/4 of an inch in. Going, flip her forward and hit the gas. Alright, so now we want to figure out which way we want to push this to see if it's going to distort one way or the other. And it looks like in this case, we're going to fold it back this direction towards us, which should be the same direction as we did the other end. Again, remember, watch those fingers. And you know, if you were hand stitching this, or if you can finesse your sewing machine well enough to do it, you could probably just stitch directly between that seam instead of having to fold it over. I would imagine that would work well enough. So like instead of folding it over, actually stitching through it, you know, like in between the two pieces of leather that are sewn there. See? You could kind of loop it over. And I would think it'd be kind of tricky with a sewing machine because you wouldn't really have a good spot for that the lock stitch to center up in there. But if you're hand stitching, it should be, I would think, be relatively easy to get it to do what you needed it to do there, and would be plenty strong and really hold a good joint. All right, now our last corner. Now, one last time, I'm going to tell you, you have one corner open. This is your last chance to make sure your zipper's open. Because if you guys are watching this and you haven't ever made one of these and you think, oh man, Jesse's video is so cool, he's so awesome, it's the best instructional video ever, I'm going to make one. And you get excited and start making it and you forget to open your zipper, oh, you're gonna be so mad. You can't blame me. I've made the mistake. I don't want anybody else to have to do that. Alright. Oh, kind of went over the edge there. That's alright though. Alright guys, and that's done. We've got all of our corners sewn up. Our zipper's open where we need it to be. So we're going to shut this down and we'll go back over to the workbench. After we got it all sewn up, I'm just going through and trimming thread, burning those ends of thread, and then checking all the stitches really well, making sure that they're all seated. We didn't skip any big spots. Everything looks good and strong, and then trimmed off just a little bit of the pull tab that was hanging off. Alright, so not only is flipping my favorite part, but it's also a little bit of the most nerve-wracking, because this is where we're going to find out if we've got any bad stitches or seams in there, which I haven't run into that yet, but it always makes me a little nervous every time. So what I've figured out is if you'll start pushing in the corners, kind of get all your corners pushed in and those seams kind of rolled in, it makes things go a little bit easier. Now this little project is something you definitely want to take into consideration when you're picking a leather to do these, because if you get anything too stiff or too thick, you're going to have a heck of a time flipping them. I've done a couple small projects where I overestimated my ability to flip, and when it came down to it, I ended up just stretching the hell out of the leather, having to wet it to make it a little more malleable to get the things to actually flip. Now this is a pretty good temper leather, so it shouldn't cause us any trouble. But then once you get those corners kind of rolled in, you can just slowly start working it out through the top there, and you can kind of start pulling from the inside, pulling the body, and just rolling with your thumbs. And roll that zipper. And if you can get that zipper rolled well, the whole bag you can kind of get it flipped out pretty good. And once you get it flipped out mostly just go back in there, and on those corners just push back out with your thumb, and it'll kind of re-square them, and you'll feel where that seam bottoms out, where the stitching is, and you know it's not going to move out anymore. Alright, so we have a flipped shape bag. Easy as that. And I'm really digging this gray. We've got our tabs in good shape. It looks like it's nice and straight and square. Looks good. Close it up. And all it needs now is a handle. And we'll kind of buzz through that real quick and show you how I do the handles. And that'll be a wrap. Alright guys and gals, so you have it. This is the finished bag. We've got it all flipped out and everything. It looks pretty good. I really like this color. We've got our tabs nice and stout, looks well. So all that's left now is just to do our handle here, and just for the sake of saving time, I'm just gonna run through it real quick how I do those. So this is just my 1-inch template I use. It's cut out. That's the length that I normally use. You just measure out the length of the handle that you want, what works best. We've got our rivet hole here, and then our rivet hole through that. And what you want to do is just go through there with your handle, and you'll line that up with a rivet. Let's see here. Poke that through. Got my rivet through there, going through the, you know, our handle on the inside, and then we've got this here. And this is just, it's kind of a tricky thing. I like to do the handles here because it allows, because I use the natural leather on the handles. I really like the way that the natural veg tan patinas. So anytime I make a bag or anything, I like to use the veg tan on a handle because that's what's going to get used the most. The oils from your hand will really patina that really well. So it'll look really nice over time. But also I like to use the veg tan handles because a lot of these I'll do, say for Christmas, I'll make a bunch of these up and I won't put the handles on half of them, and I can advertise those as a personalizable item. And it's real easy to come in here and stamp a name or do some little tooling or carving, you know, whatever you want to do. I've done some with just some finger carving, some basket weave, stamping names, you name it. If you can fit it on there, you can do it. It'd also be really easy to just do a wider handle and then taper it down here at the edges. You could do some scallops on it that would look really nice. Make yourself a bigger handle to add a bunch of tooling on there if you wanted to. But pretty much that's the bag. I have a small anvil from Harbor Freight, and using, I think it's this end here, I can basically put the bag around that and get that laid down on a flat area on that anvil from the inside, so I can get a good surface to set those rivets. That's really just kind of a tedious thing also. It kind of sucks doing it, but that's the easiest way I've found to do it. Ideally, if you had a foot anvil or like a boot anvil, you know, where it kind of could stick up in there, that'd work really well. But that's what I've got, so that's what I use, and it's worked out so far so good. And another thing with the handles, if you didn't want to do a handle, it'd be just as easy to just put 2 tabs on either side. I may actually do a few of those this Christmas just to change it up a little bit. But up to this point, all I've ever done to the handles here, if you're hand stitching them, you could probably hand stitch that on there, put a nice little scalloped end on there and hand stitch it. I think it'd be too difficult to do on a machine to get in there because it has to be done after the bag's made. But you know, that's it. That's really where we're at here on this bag. It's pretty well done. You know, they're so versatile, really easy to make, relatively speaking. It'd be real easy to put a panel, a veg tan panel, sewn onto the outside of one and fill that up with tooling or any kind of personalization, stamping or whatever. But there you have it. This has been one of our best sellers in the last 2 or 3 years. Every year at Christmas, this is our #1 item. Pricing on these can be anywhere all over the board depending on the market you're in. But there we go. Zipper's awful stiff, but new zippers are like that. I've been told putting some paraffin wax or beeswax on zippers help break them in, help them run a little smoother while they're breaking in. But there we have it. That is how you make a shade bag. Alright, so that is how we build the shade bags here at Lost Penguin. I hope this video will be beneficial to some of you out there. I'm sure there are some out there already that do it entirely different than I do. I'm no professional by any means. There are more than one way to build these. This is just the way that I do it, and I may figure out a better way to do it later on, but for the time being, this is how we're going to make them. A super easy thing to change up a little bit and build it your own way. Just wanted to do a video like this because I know when I started, I wanted to build these for a long time, but I was kind of intimidated at the time because I didn't understand those corners. When I was trying to think it, you know, inside out and backwards to build these, it was, I don't know, I wasn't smart enough to do it in my own head. And after finally seeing someone else doing it and showing me how it was done, everything kind of clicked, and it really helped me along the way with these. Anyways, this is going to be my first tutorial video. It's all being shot on an iPhone, so I'm sure the quality is going to be complete bunk when I get it thrown up online. But nevertheless, I hope it's beneficial to some folks. If you have any questions at all, I'm always easy to get a hold of. You can email us through our website, info@lostpenguinleather.com. You can shoot me a DM on Instagram, which is just @lostpenguinleather. We're also on Facebook. We're most active on Instagram. We would love for you to give us a follow. I'm probably going to be throwing this up on YouTube. This will be my first official YouTube video, so I'd love for you to subscribe if you like the video, and hopefully we can start turning out a little bit more content about concerning the things that we do here, and hopefully some more tutorials and how-tos. So if you like the video, give it a like, please. If you don't, tell me why. Tell me what I could change. Tell me how you build it. If you have any suggestions on ways to change this, I'm always open for constructive criticism. If you have any questions about the tools or the leathers or anything else that's seen in the video, the suppliers, please let me know. I'll try to put some links down in the description telling what all that is. Also, I'll try to get a picture of my actual template for the body of the bag itself, and I'll get that thrown up in the video somewhere, so you can get your own, or know the actual measurements for the bag. Anyways, again, I'm Jesse Beckham with Lost Penguin Leather. I want to thank you for watching this video if you made it this far through, and if you have any questions, please let us know. Until next time, thanks for watching, guys and gals.